No land force can act decisively unless it is accompanied by a maritime superiority. For proof of this, we have only to recur to the instances of the ease and facility with which the British shifted their ground as advantages were to be obtained at either extremity of the continent, and to their late heavy loss the moment they failed in their naval superiority. It follows then, as certain as that night succeeds the day, that without a decisive naval force we can do nothing definitive, and with it everything honorable and glorious.
George Washington was writing to the Marquis de Lafayette shortly after the Americans' victory over the British at Yorktown in 1781. Support by the French Navy at that battle, and by both the French and Spanish navies earlier in the war, had been critical to winning the American Revolutionary War and securing independence. America had its own navy during the war, but it was despairingly small compared to the navies of both its allies and its enemies. It's not that America lacked sailors. The former British colonies were stretched out along the coast. Goods shipped from Boston to Charleston were quite literally shipped, and merchant vessels maintained a steady flow of goods between America and Europe, as well as the Caribbean islands. And many of the colonial sailors would have been experienced in naval combat on armed merchant vessels granted letters of marque and reprisal. These documents, provided by Britain and other European nations, gave private parties the authority to attack enemy vessels. Do that without a letter of marque and you're a pirate. But with the proper documentation, you're a privateer. During Britain's not infrequent wars with France and Spain, American privateers got plenty of opportunities to learn how to man guns and board a ship. But privateers are not a navy. They lack the discipline, coordination, command, and firepower of naval warships. Throughout its history, America's shipping and coastal security had been protected by the greatest naval power in the world, the British Royal Navy. Britain had 131 ships of the line, the most powerful warships of the day. Only about a third were battle-ready, but to combat them, the Americans had none. Nor did they have a navy. Not until on October 13th, 1775, when the Continental Congress passed the resolution creating the Continental Navy. They ordered the building of some vessels and the purchase of others. By the end of the year, 17 ships were ready for service. Over the course of the war, the Navy would only ever have about 65 ships. Fewer than a dozen would survive the war, the rest being destroyed or captured. America would need privateers to augment the Navy. Between 1,700 and 2,000 privateer ships sailed on behalf of the new American nation, preying upon British merchants and transport ships throughout the war. The first captain given command of a Continental Navy warship was John Barry, considered by many to be the father of the American Navy. Barry captained the USS Lexington in 1776, capturing numerous enemy ships. And he commanded the USS Alliance when it won the final naval battle of the Revolutionary War in 1783. One of the most famous seamen of the American Navy was the Scottish-born John Paul Jones. Appointed a first lieutenant of the Navy on December 22, 1775, Jones was the first man to hoist the American flag on a naval warship. Jones had numerous successes at sea, and it wasn't long before he was made captain. During his service, he commanded various ships, either as a captain or as a commodore, a senior captain of a naval squadron. His most famous battle came while he commanded a small squadron of ships off the coast of England. The flagship of the squadron was a French merchant vessel, which he had converted to a warship with a battery of 40 guns. He renamed the ship Bonhomme Richard in honor of Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac. In September 1779, Jones led his squadron up and down the English coast, hunting merchant ships bound for London. On September 23rd, he spotted a British convoy of merchant ships carrying goods to England from the Baltic Sea region, and Jones gave chase. The merchants were escorted by 2 British warships. Jones chose the larger of the 2, the 50-gun Serapis, for battle with the Bonhomme Richard. The Serapis was bigger, faster, more maneuverable than Jones' ship, and its crew was much more disciplined. Yet, Jones threw his ship into the fight, bringing the Bonhomme Richard within pistol range of the Serapis. Things looked bad for the Americans. Over half the ship's officers had been killed or wounded. The starboard gunnery was all but gone. 18-pound shot had pierced the hull of the ship multiple times, and it was taking on water. And so, the captain of the Serapis called out to Jones, asking if Jones' ship had struck its colors, meaning surrendered. And Jones famously responded, "I have not even begun to fight." The ships pulled apart, and the broadsiding continued. But a fortunate wind and Jones' seamanship brought the Richard around and against the Serapis, bow to stern. Jones lashed the ships together, and the primary weapons shifted from cannons to muskets. The French Marines had lost their captain and lieutenants, so Jones took command of them and took up a musket to fire along with them. The British captain fought to separate the ships, knowing that if the battle returned to broadsides from cannon, he was certain to win. Jones knew that as well, and he directed his French Marines to fire at any British sailor attempting to cut the ropes holding the ships together. Fires broke out on both ships multiple times. Half the men on both ships were killed or disabled. One of the ships of Jones' squadron actually fired into both the Richard and Serapis, doing as much damage to Jones's ship as to the enemy. At one point, one of the Richard's gunners, believing his ship to be sinking, called out to the enemy for quarter. But before the British captain could respond, Jones knocked his gunner down with the butt of his pistol. Again and again, it seemed the Richard had no chance. But then, finally, the battle turned in Jones's favor. He had ordered men to drop hand grenades into the Serapis' main hatch. Now one finally landed amid a pile of cartridges, setting off a chain of explosions and killing many of the British. Jones's men began to board the Serapis, and soon it was the British captain who struck his colors. And none too soon, the Bonhomme Richard had fought its last fight and sank into the Atlantic. But with the war over, America quickly determined that it could not afford even the remnant of the Navy that had survived. It was disbanded in 1790, leaving only a small force of revenue cutters, the predecessor to the U.S. Coast Guard, to patrol the coast. As a result, U.S. merchant ships now had almost no protection from pirates. Prior to the Declaration of Independence, American merchant ships were protected from pirates both by the Royal Navy and by British treaties with North African states. But soon after the war, pirates from the Barbary Coast began taking American ships. In 1784, Moroccan pirates captured an American merchant vessel. Algerian pirates captured more in 1785, and then continued over the next decade. America began paying tribute to the pirates. Congress reacted with the Naval Act of 1794, which authorized the building of 6 frigates, 4 with 44 guns, and 2 with 36 guns. The original 6 frigates of the new United States Navy were the USS United States, the President, the Constellation, the Chesapeake, the Congress, and the Constitution. Designed by Joshua Humphreys, the USS Constellation was the first U.S. Navy vessel put out to sea, and also the first to defeat an enemy ship. Humphreys designed the Constellation to be stronger than other frigate-class ships, but faster than the more powerful ships of the line. She was 164 feet in length with a 13.5-foot draft and carried 38 24-pounder guns. Another incentive for the Americans to take more deliberate steps in developing their military was the increased tension with France in the mid to late 1790s. While America had been busy creating a government of, by, and for the people, France went through a revolution of its own. And as American relations with Britain improved, its relations with now revolutionary France soured. Britain was again engaged in hostilities with France. The French were angered by America's apparent siding with Britain and attacked American merchant vessels. In 1798, Congress created the Navy Department to provide organizational structure to the service, and the U.S. Marine Corps to add to the nation's defense. The Navy sailed with dozens of ships, augmented by hundreds of privateers. The U.S. force performed well, capturing French ships and freeing some captured American merchant ships. In the new Navy's first major triumph, the USS Constellation captured the French frigate L'Insurgente, a fast 40-gun ship, on February 9, 1799. The prospect of America allying with Britain was enough to calm tensions and bring the parties to the negotiating table. War was averted, though not in time to save Adams from losing the 1800 election to Jefferson.